Welcome to Speak Out, Stand Out by Green Communications, where we're learning how to help our kids become better communicators. We believe our voices are the strongest asset we have, and our mission is to empower the next generation to use their voices to make a difference in the world around them. Whether you are a parent, an educator, or are just invested in today's youth, we hope this podcast will help you build confidence in our future, one voice at a time. Welcome back to Speak Out, Stand Out. I'm Elizabeth Green, and today's guest is Dr. Gila. Dr. Gila is a certified parent coach and owner of Connection-Based Parenting. She's a psychologist, a neuropsychologist, and most importantly, she is a single mom. Dr. Gila helps parents handle the hard stuff and build strong and healthy relationships with their kids and themselves. And as a single mom herself, she has a special interest in supporting other single parents. Her motto is, and I love this, it is, even if you are on your own, you don't have to do it alone. So Dr. Gila, we are so glad to have you here, and you are on a special mission, and glad to be able to chat with you for a few minutes.
Thank you so much. I'm really happy to be here.
So just quickly, I gave like a little bit of your background, but how did you get to this point where this is your focus, your mission in life?
Yeah. So like you said, I started out as a psychologist and a neuropsychologist, and I am still. I have a virtual practice in New York State, but as a single mom of what some might call a strong-willed kid or intense kid, spicy kid, so many different names. It's been challenging, even with all of my fancy degrees and experience, right? It was still challenging. And so it has been challenging. I'm sure it will continue to be in different ways. So I took a deep dive into figuring out how to parent my kid the best way that he needs for him. And in the process, I really became passionate about supporting other parents to do the same. So, like you said, I really focused not only on building strong relationships with our kids, but also building those strong relationships with ourselves, because really that's where it starts. And it's an often overlooked piece, and it's so important.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I love that. Not that I don't like to hear you say that it's been hard despite all of your degrees and everything, but it is nice to hear that, that parenting is a universal challenge, regardless of how much education, how much knowledge we have, even how much experience we have, right? Every child is so different.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
It's nice to know that we're all in it together, right?
We are. That's right.
Well, so today we want to have a little bit more of a serious conversation, and we want to chat a little bit about how to have conversations and build communication skills in our kids so they know how to communicate whenever it comes to hard things that are happening outside of the home, things that are happening around the world, things they're hearing on the news that can be scary, can be upsetting. How do we have conversations with our kids about this? Because they're hearing it, whether we want them to or not. So, Dr. Gila, glad we're able to dive into this with you and your expertise. So just for starters, I mean, if you're listening to this in a timely manner, there's a lot of things happening that are in the world that are disturbing and upsetting to hear for us as adults. So what do we do? I mean, we can't shield our kids from it. And should we shield our kids from it, even if we could? Kind of starting with
That's the $1 million question, right? We want to put our kids in a bubble. Of course we do. And it's projection, because we wish we could put ourselves in a bubble, right? I mean, no one wants to deal with these things. These news stories. And honestly, no matter when you're listening to this, unfortunately, it's probably close to something horrible in the news. And this is, I think, the hardest part of humaning, let alone the hardest part of parenting, right? This is hard. Mm-hmm. And so I think the first message is, it is understandable and it makes sense if you're struggling with this. And it's not because you don't know what you're doing or you're a bad parent or you don't have it figured out and under control, whatever that means. It's because this is hard. This is legitimately hard. And the other sort of big meta message that I want to send about it is that for everything in parenting, including this, perfection is not the goal. Right? Perfection is not the goal, because first of all, perfection is not possible. It's not realistic. And second of all, because it's actually, I say, not desirable because our kids, they're also struggling with these things and they're also going to make mistakes. And so when we struggle, it is an opportunity to, first of all, normalize for our kids. And second of all, to model for them, how do we handle it when we're struggling? Right? How do we handle it? So, the thing that's really hard about these big news stories is that we ourselves are struggling with it. It's not that we're just helping our kids with something that they're struggling with. We are struggling with it.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so where do we start then? How do we,
Yeah.
and it's interesting too, because a lot of these things I think we hear on the news, they seem so far away. And in some cases they seem very personal. And in some cases they seem so far away. So it's easy just to sometimes brush it to the side and not think about, what are the implications of my child hearing this? And does this make him afraid or nervous or things like that? So where do we start with how we deal with it ourselves?
Yeah. Yeah. So the first thing is starting with ourselves, I think. And really I think that's true in almost every piece of parenting, right? I have this analogy that I like, that each of us has a metaphorical sink inside of us. And when your sink is really full, just a few more drops of water are going to make that sink overflow. And that's when you're dysregulated, you snap, you yell, you shut down. When your sink is emptier, you can handle the exact same drops of water and even more. And so the key is to really work on keeping our own sinks nice and healthy, taking care of ourselves, because one of the things that can fill your sink super quick is someone else's sink overflowing into it. And that's often what happens when our kids are having a really hard time. So, I think as parents, we often feel guilty tending to our own needs, and yet it very much is how we take care of our kids is to make sure that our needs are taken care of. So again, when really hard things are happening in the world, I think the first thing is to take a little bit of time to process it yourself, if you can. Now, sometimes that's not possible, but, and I'm not saying that we shouldn't show our emotions to our kids. Absolutely, it is healthy and expected and understandable to show emotions to your kids when you're struggling with something. But I do think that taking that time to at least take a little bit of that edge off, so that when you're having this tough conversation with your child, you can be more focused on their experience of it and how they're receiving the news. And your sink is just a little bit more empty, so you have some more room for that. So what does that mean? That's going to be different for different people. I think journaling is a beautiful practice that can help a lot of people. Certainly reaching out for support, talking to friends and family, talking to a professional if you have one on your team, a psychologist, a therapist of some kind, a coach. Taking time to breathe. We really sometimes don't appreciate just how helpful and important breathing is, right? Taking that moment to take that intentional breath and to remind ourselves that we are safe, because when these things happen, it can hijack your brain and it feels like you are in imminent danger, right? Your brain is responding as if it is in imminent danger. And so taking that moment to slow down before you talk to your child, taking some breaths and grounding yourself, telling yourself, I am safe. I am safe, right? This is, it's such a simple phrase and yet really powerful. I am safe in this moment, right?
Yeah. And
So
I think,
yeah.
oh, sorry. No, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, so I think that is step one, right? Step one is starting with ourselves, is if you can, if you have the time. Obviously, if there is an emergency, if the house is on fire, you're not going to take the time to ground yourself, right? Get your kid out of the house. But we're talking about things happening in the news that are not directly happening to you. And so if you can, take the time, take a little bit of time to take that edge off, to take care of yourself.
Yeah, that makes sense. And then do you suggest that we broach the conversation with our kids about things like this? Do we wait and see if they
Right.
mention it, if they're,
Mm-hmm.
because
Yeah.
it's oftentimes easier to just wait and see if it comes up
Mm-hmm.
rather
Yeah.
than taking the initiative. But, maybe
Yeah.
they're not paying attention at all. And maybe we're starting an unnecessary conversation. So what are your thoughts
Yeah.
on that?
Yes. So this, excuse me, this is an incredibly difficult question, and it's one that I think there is no definitive right or wrong answer, right? The only wrong answer, I think, there is one thing that I think is potentially quote unquote wrong, and that is exposing our kids to lots of disturbing videos and news about what is going on, because there are things that you can't unsee and that can
Yeah.
really traumatize, even if it hasn't happened to you. So we need to be mindful. And so going into it without giving any thought to what they're seeing and what they're experiencing, that's the only quote unquote wrong thing, I think. And by sheer virtue of the fact that you're listening to this episode, I know that you parents, you're being intentional and thoughtful about this, and you're not doing that. And so in terms of whether to tell them, there's a lot of different things online about, different ages and what the answer is for different age groups. And what I want to say is that those are a great starting point, but they are not universal. And there's other things that are going to factor in. And some of those are, for example, first of all, there's news events that are a one-time thing, and then there's news events that are ongoing, and that's going to be a different story, right? So right now we're recording this during the new war that just broke out in Israel, and this is not like one and done. This is a evolving and emerging situation, and it's much more likely that your kids are going to hear about it than something that was, just a one-time event. Other things to keep in mind are, not only your child's age, but your child's developmental stage and capacity. And this is going to vary. One 8-year-old is not the same as another 8-year-old. Your child's personality and temperament, your child's way of processing information, and what they're exposed to. So is it likely that they're going to be exposed to this in other places? And then another piece is, how directly is your family affected? Because that is, first of all, going to affect how likely it is that your child is going to hear about this. And it's also going to affect, whether your child really has a right to know. I like to talk about the importance of respecting our children as humans in this world, right? They are experiencing the world, and their experience of the world is valid and worthy. And there are some things that I do think they have a right to know, even if we wish with all our might, we wish that it wasn't true, and we wish that we could protect them from it forever. It is the reality, and we can't protect them from it. So I know that's not the magic wand clear answer that people want, and it's not the magic wand clear answer that I want either. And I want you to know that this is something that, even as a psychologist and a parent coach, I struggle with this also with my own child. What do we tell them, and what do we protect them from?
Yeah. And you're right. It's so situational. There's definitely no clear answer. That makes sense. And taking
Mm-hmm.
everything into account, though, is helpful for us to evaluate our own situations, our own children, and what's going on. Well, let's say that the kids, they start talking about things, and maybe they're wrong. Maybe the things that they're saying are just inaccurate.
Mm.
At what point do we correct them when we're talking about like actual news, like factual events and things like that? What point do we correct them, or what point do we just kind of let it go?
Mm. Oh, that's an interesting question. Yeah. I think if they are talking about facts that are wrong, that you should absolutely correct them. Yeah. And I think, so when you decide that you do want to tell them, we can talk about like how to do that, and some tips for doing that.
Mhm.
They might have questions either in that moment or later on. And one of my tips is that when you have that conversation with them, that you make it clear that not only can they come to you and ask questions in that conversation, but that you keep the communication open, that you let them know that if at any point they have questions, if they're confused about something or they're not sure if something is true or not, that they absolutely can come to you. And I would build that in to proactively check in with them occasionally. Ask them, what have you heard about this? To see if they are getting information that, or, sometimes it's not that they've heard misinformation, but they've processed it in a way that isn't true, right? I mean, all information goes through our filter, the receiver's filter, and our kids, they don't have all the tools to really make sense of this. And so they might be misunderstanding things. So I absolutely think that one of our roles as parents is to help them work through this. Yeah.
Yeah. So when you said, ask them what have you heard about this? Do you suggest that that's a good way to start the conversation?
Yeah.
I'm not one just in check-ins, but just if approaching, if we want to have a conversation with our kids today about what's happening in Israel, is that the way that you suggest that we start that conversation?
I think that's a great way, especially for your tweens and teens. It certainly depends on, for this situation, you might have heard about it before they were in school or online or anything like that. And so if they have been around other people before you even heard about it and had a chance to talk to them, I think that's a great way to start the conversation. Otherwise, I think a big thing to keep in mind is, first of all, to give them the facts and really the basic facts that they need to know, the minimum that they need to know, to sort of tell them the headline and to let them process that and then respond to any questions that they have. One of the things that I think we adults often do is what I call pre-empathy. It's like preemptive empathy. And this means we go into conversations with this sort of expectation of what our children are going to feel or how they're going to react to a particular piece of news. And so we want to empathize. And so we go in, and the way we tell them is almost like responding to how we expect they're going to feel. So we're sort of, and often that's a projection. It's a projection of how we feel about it or how we would feel about it if someone told us. So one example about this is my son used to have a lot of food allergies. And when he was a toddler, I remember we were at a birthday party and there was this, delicious and beautiful cake. And he asked me, can I eat the cake? And this was only one scene of many that it played out a lot of times. And, I said to him pretty matter-of-factly, well, I don't think that the cake is safe for you, but we brought this delicious cupcake just for you. And he could have broken down and had a meltdown about it. That would have been absolutely possible and certainly understandable. He didn't. He took it in stride and he said, oh, okay. Right. So I could have gone into the situation and said, oh, sweet boy, I'm so sorry. That cake just is not safe for you. I know that's so hard. Right. And that is sending him a message. This is something to be upset about before he's even upset about it. Right. So this is pre-empathizing. This doesn't mean you shouldn't empathize with your kids, right? It just means to start out and give them the headline, give them the basic fact that they need to know about what's going on, and then to give them an opportunity to respond and react the way that they will, and to empathize and validate and listen to what that response is, even if it's different than what we would have how we would have responded or how we thought that they were going to respond.
I think that I love your story about the cake, because that just puts it into such simple terms to be able to understand. And I can absolutely think back on many times when I've done the same thing, pre-empathized. So, and I think sometimes in situations like this, they may be, horribly upset about the idea of war, things like that, or they might not, I mean, especially if they're not in all the details, that we
Mhm.
are and that we read and that we see, that it might
Mhm.
not be something that really stresses them out or worries them.
Yeah, exactly. And the other thing is, I think that there's sort of two pieces of information that you might want to share with them. One is the basic fact, the headline of what's going on.
Mhm.
The other is that people, including you, are upset about it, right? So it doesn't mean that they have to be upset about it, but if this is something that is really affecting you, right? If you're
Mhm.
finding that you're distracted by it, you're emotional about it, sharing with them, I'm feeling really sad about this right now. And you might see other grown-ups feeling really sad. And it's okay if you're not sad about it. I just want you to know why the grown-ups in your life are sad right now.
That makes sense. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Well, what other tips and strategies do you have when we're talking about anything kind of tough with kids? Any
Mhm.
other things that in your toolbox that you recommend that we can, keep in our back pockets?
Yeah. So, so one thing is, first of all, when they are asking questions, to make sure to give yourself permission to not respond immediately and reflexively, to take a moment and make sure that you're understanding what the question is and where it's coming from. Right. And so sometimes, because again, we are human and we, especially if this is about something horrific going on in the world, we are processing it through our very emotional and biased ears and eyes, right? And
Yeah.
so what they're asking, again, might not be exactly what you would be asking or what you think they're asking. So make sure that you understand what it is they want to know and where that's coming from and help them sort of put it into context. So don't be afraid to ask that follow-up question. Like, I'm curious, why are you asking that? Or what do you think the answer is, right before you give your answer? One thing that I think is super important to be on the lookout, especially, like I said, right now we're in the midst of this war in Israel. There's a lot of potential for hatred to come up against particular groups. And so it's really important to be mindful of of stereotypes that might come up and bias that might come up and hatred that might come up, and to counter those narratives. I believe that's one of our responsibilities as parents as well. And then a huge piece, of course, is making sure your kids feel safe, or as safe as possible. And I think this is super tricky when we parents don't feel safe necessarily, right? I mean, how can we do this in a way that feels authentic and that feels aligned? Like, I think that that's one of the big questions. And so, personally, one of my top values as a parent is honesty. I don't lie to my child. I don't lie that the park is closed when it's not closed. I don't lie to my child. And I'm not judging. I know there are times and places where it's understandable that parents do lie. And if you have lied to your child about the park being closed, I totally understand. I'm not judging. But I really believe that we should not lie. I personally believe that I don't want to lie to my child. And so how do you communicate safety when in an authentic way that you really believe, that doesn't feel like lying? And so I think part of the answer is communicating safety in the moment, right? You are safe right now. You are safe. Again, if you're in a burning fire, then get them out and don't tell them they're safe. But we're talking about
Right.
things in the news, right? So you are safe. We are safe right now, and focusing on the fact that there are a lot of grown-ups who are working very hard to make sure that we stay safe.
I think that's a really fantastic point. And I have one final question regarding that. Do you think that that's important for us to express, even if they don't seem bothered or seem worried?
Yes,
Or
right.
do we just only go to that route if they seem upset about it?
Yes, I love that question. Absolutely. I think if you have the conversation with your kids, you absolutely need to say, you are safe, we are safe, and there are people working hard to make sure we stay safe. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, Dr. Gila, I think this was really, really helpful, especially in light of everything that's going on. But this, applies to so many situations in our lives. So you also do coaching and you have a million degrees and expertise, but you also offer, people can work directly with you, right?
Yes, yes,
So tell us
absolutely.
just a little bit more about what you do.
Yeah, so my business is called Connection-Based Parenting, and my website is connectionbasedparenting.com. And I have a free video folks can download, and then that also gets you signed up to my email list. So I send weekly emails with tips and suggestions, and I also announce any of my new programs and products there. The video, I know parents have super limited time, and so the video is very short. It's a 5-minute video, and it's about the 3 mindsets, the 3 truths that I personally find so helpful and my clients find helpful when you're having a hard moment, in those hard parenting moments that we all have. And I finished the video with a short, quick grounding strategy. And that grounding strategy and those mindsets, these are things that I think can be helpful in what we were just talking about today, in having these conversations with our kids, because really regulating ourselves and grounding ourselves is a big part of that. So I'll show you the link. It's connectionbasedparenting.com/truths. But hopefully we can put that in the show notes. And then I'm also on Instagram and Facebook. I'm Dr. Gila Parenting. So DRGILA_parenting.
Fantastic. And we'll have all the links to everything in the show notes. So it's super easy for you to click through and follow her on socials and get that video and reach out if you want some more information. So again, we appreciate all your time, all your insight. Thanks for being here today.
Thank you. Can I end with one last little thing, which is to please take care of yourselves during these hard times. And that means you don't need to watch all the horrific videos. You don't need to have the news on 24/7. Take care of yourself. If you need a break from social media, take care of yourself.
Yeah, that's such an important thing. Thank you.
Thank you.
If you are looking for more ways to build communication skills in your kids, grab our free mini lesson on how to craft a polished and professional speech out of thin air, along with 52 fun prompts so your kids can practice every single week. You can find that along with info about our upcoming public speaking and debate courses for kids at greencommunicationsedu.com.